So I had some coaches reach out to me on Facebook because they're having a hard time getting their athletes to compete, and they asked some really good questions. So I promised them a video, as that would be the most in-depth, complete way to answer their questions. So let's read their questions. All right, so Kristen asked, after reading your comments, I realized I have athletes that are threatened or stressed during competition. They struggle to perform in big ball games. If we're playing a team we're better than, we compete, we keep our composure. However, if we play someone we shouldn't beat, we fold before the game even starts. We forget how to catch a ball or basic fundamentals. What can I do to help my team or individuals enjoy competition, enjoy the challenge that better teams bring, or to get over their stress that competition brings? I also see this stress in the classroom when they are challenged by a teacher. I would appreciate any insight. Thank you. Shauna followed that up with, I definitely had competitiveness in a blurred line with passion or heart. Maybe competing is too much for some athletes, even though they love the game. It's not a concept I fully grasp, as I would think that the love of the game would drive the athlete to compete. Can we help foster a healthy desire to compete? What is the root of not competing? Fear or something like failure, ? Not being good enough, ego. Okay, so we have a ton to unpack there. And by the end of this video, I hope to help Shauna and Kristen and anybody watching this. I hope to help them understand, why do athletes at times fear or avoid competition? What's the necessary mindset shift that we need to help them be able to make, so that way they stop fearing and avoiding competition? And then towards the end, I'll talk about a few different ways that we can start to install this mindset into our athletes and into our teams. Today, we're going to get better. All right, before we dive in, if you're new here and you're looking for the best mental performance tools, tactics, and advice, then make sure to hit that subscribe button and that notification bell, so that way you'll be notified the next time that I post a video just like this one. It also goes a really long way to supporting the channel and supporting what I'm trying to do here, so I'd really appreciate it. All right, so before we get to why specifically athletes tend to fear or avoid competition, I do want to dispel this common misconception that Shauna alluded to in her question. Coaches or parents, they correlate a lack of competitiveness in an athlete, and they immediately think that that means that that athlete isn't passionate, or that that athlete doesn't have enough heart. And to be honest with you, this couldn't be further from the truth, because athletes, especially young athletes, they can draw their passion for their sport from a whole host of reasons. I mean, you think about the most obvious one would be, it's a part of their social circle. They get them out of the house, they get to see their friends, they get to engage, and they get to interact. And for a lot of athletes, especially younger athletes, that's a huge driver for why they do their sport in the first place, not necessarily this need to compete. And many times I think parents and coaches kind of fall into this trap of, they're projecting essentially what they think competitiveness is, right? Or what they think passion and heart is, because they believe that if you're passionate or you have heart for your sport, then that you want to compete. And that's just really how they feel about their sport, and how competitiveness connects to passion and heart. But that doesn't necessarily mean that every single athlete, especially younger athletes, really uses competition as the main driving force for why they're participating in the sport in the first place. So that's one reason that an athlete may not show as much competitiveness towards their sport. The other reason, and probably the reason why most people are watching this, and why you're probably watching this, is they're afraid of it, or they have an unhealthy relationship with competition. And this is a topic that I brought up in that Facebook conversation, and it only led to more questions, which is completely understandable. But essentially, it all starts when we think about fear or avoiding competition. We have to take a look at, what is this unhealthy relationship, or really unproductive relationship, that the athlete has when they think about competition? And this relationship with competition is such an important concept for not only athletes to understand, but probably at times, maybe even more so, coaches and parents to understand how their athlete's relationship with competition is going to either help or hurt their ability to enter that competition, be it bringing the best versions of themselves to that competition that day. That unhealthy relationship that we're talking about is that many times, and I see this so much, athletes feel threatened when they enter a competition. And the reason that they feel threatened is because their sport has become such a big part of who they are. It's become such a big part of their identity as a person. So let's back up a bit and talk about identity, specifically how it applies to athletes and how an athlete goes about this process of developing that identity, because as an athlete starts participating in their sport, they start to invest a lot of time into their sport, and their sport then becomes a big part of who they are. Not only are they investing time, but their family is as well. It's a big financial commitment to the family, as well as a big time commitment, a big energy commitment. It becomes a big part of that athlete's social circle, a big portion of their friends, and how in their human social interaction and connection comes from their sport. When they go to a holiday and grandpa and grandma come over, what's the first thing that they ask about? You get the idea. So it becomes a big part of who they are. It becomes a big part of how they value themselves, but it also becomes a big part of how they perceive that the world around them values them as well. And that's essentially what an identity is in a nutshell. I'll say that again. Our identity as people, and especially for these young athletes, our identity is made up of how do we value ourselves, and maybe at times, unfortunately even more so, how do we perceive that the world values us. And as an athlete continues on this sport journey, not only does what they do, their sport, become such a big part of who they are now, it becomes a massive part of who they want to be in the future. Many of my athletes that I work with, their sport is a big part of their future plans, scholarships, and other opportunities, advancing, through the ranks of sport to get opportunities on higher level teams. It becomes a massive, critical part of how they perceive their ability to attain the things that they want in their future. So when they go into competition, what's really at stake for some of these athletes? What do they perceive to be at risk? Well, they perceive that there's risk in how they're going to see themselves, how the people around them, their friends and their parents and coaches and grandma and grandpa, how might they see me depending on the results of this competition, as well as how is the results of this competition going to impact my future? That's a lot. That is a massive burden that some athletes put on themselves when they enter a competition. And I personally know this because I've worked with, at this point in my career, thousands, no joke, thousands of athletes navigate this unproductive mindset and this unproductive relationship with competition. And there's nothing more rewarding than watching these athletes free themselves, figuring out ways to free themselves of this burden so that way they can bring their best, most authentic self to the competition. But that's why so many athletes fear and tend to avoid competition. And believe me, it's way deeper than a lot of the stuff that you'll see out there. It's way deeper than just fear of failure. This is not the channel of fluff. We're not the channel of just like buzzword explanations for why these things happen. We have to go a layer deeper. We have to understand, yes, it's fear of failure, but why? And the reason why is, how have they constructed their identity as a person? And what are all these things that they perceive to be at risk the moment that they step on the court, the ice, the field? You get it. Comment with just the number 1 below in the chat if at this point you're nodding your head because you've seen this in either yourself as an athlete or some of the athletes that you're coaching or parenting. Just give me a number 1 in the chat to let me know that you're following along. So before we move on to talking about the necessary mindset shift that we need our athletes to make in order to overcome this fear of competition, I've got a free gift for you. I want you to get over to my website, trainwithperk.com/free guide. What you're gonna find there is a 100% free guide to help either you, if you're an athlete, or if you're a parent or a coach, one of your athletes be better prepared for their next big moment. If I had an athlete walk into my office and say, Jay, I've got a big competition coming up. What are some little things that I can do? The exact answer to that question or to those questions is located in that free guide. Again, that's trainwithperk.com/free guide. So let's talk about the necessary mindset shift that we need our athletes to make so that way they're going to be more open to competition and what competition actually means. So a mindset is nothing more than the patterned way that we think. It's our thought habits. And obviously what we talked about above, what if we have an athlete or if you're an athlete and your mindset is that you have this nasty habit within your mindset where you're going to put so much of yourself on the line and at risk during a competition, that's what I would call probably a pretty unproductive mindset. So we have to make a shift, and that shift starts with getting away from the root cause of that unproductive relationship of that mindset that we talked about above, and that's results. We have to get away from this results-oriented thinking as athletes. And we also, as parents and coaches, we have to get our athletes to stop being so focused and so fixated on results. Because honestly, at the end of the day, results, any result, or your ability to produce, or an athlete's ability to produce as an athlete, your ability to get results or produce completely 100% outside of your control. And I can see some of you watching this already saying like, oh, here we go, right? Listen, I'm not Mr. Fluff guy. I'm not Mr. Head in the Clouds guy. I get it. I get that for many of my clients, they have to win. Winning is important. We have to be able to perform. We need to be able to get results. For my corporate client, right, who works in sales, he needs to be able to produce. He needs to be able to sell. He needs to be able to get results in order for him to achieve the goals that he's been given. And so that way he can advance throughout his career. For my pro soccer player, she needs to win. She needs to perform well to win her spot on the team, to win more opportunities, to win a bigger role on the team. So listen, I get it. Winning matters, but we have to think about what mindset positions us to allow ourselves to be in the best possible position to succeed. Because this mindset that's so results oriented, the mindset that says every single competition, that there's a chance that everything that an athlete is or who they are, what they're about, everything that they are as a person is on the line. Is that a productive mindset? I would say no, because you think about all the things that could potentially take that individual's focus away from where it needs to be. That mindset's going to cause them to think about what everybody else is thinking and what might happen and drift off into the future. It's going to wreak havoc on their mental state. It's going to wreak havoc on their ability to perform consistently. But what if an athlete shifted their mindset? What if they stopped being so focused on results and instead started to focus on, how do I bring the best version of myself to the competition today? How can I use this as an opportunity to hone my craft, to get better, to develop as a player, to bring something that I was working on in practice to competition that day? What sort of impact do you think that would have on that individual's mindset? Because what that mindset is going to allow them to do is that it immediately positions the athlete to be in just a fundamentally better position to succeed. They're going to have better control over their focus. They're going to be able to manage their emotions better. They're going to be able to act confidently more consistently. And instead of, just having a mindset that wreaks havoc on their performance, they're going to immediately position themselves to focus on the things that they need to keep their mind on the task at hand and be able to perform far more consistently. And it's amazing what starts to happen when an athlete is able to make this mindset shift. So if you're one of those athletes, like I said, make sure that you get over there, trainwithpert.com/free guide. It's really going to help you out in this area, especially when it comes to this mindset shift that we need to be able to make. All right, so let's talk about how do we go about installing this mindset. And I'll be honest with you, this is not going to be easy. It's a challenging shift to make. And if you're an athlete watching this, understanding where you need to get to at this point in the video, it's probably pretty clear. But getting there is going to be a challenge. And it honestly starts with the way that you talk to yourself. Because if we want to change the expectations or change the focus of what we have going into a competition, if we want to change the expectations, we have to change the narrative. We have to change this narrative that's going on in our head. And the only way to change the narrative is to change the way we talk to ourselves. Because at the end of the day, nobody talks to you as an athlete more than you do. So if you want to start making this shift, it starts with, how can you consistently change the way you talk to yourself? And how does that self-talk make you far more deliberate on focusing on the things that we talked about that are in your control and getting yourself away from all those things that are outside of your control? Because like we've talked about to this point, that's really unproductive. And for you coaches and parents watching this, I'm sure at this point, you're probably wondering, well, what are some things that you can do? And to be honest with you, it's very similar to what the athlete needs to be able to do. You need to start paying attention to what narrative are you creating for the athlete? And this is whether you're a parent or a coach. What narrative? How are you reacting to results? Where are you placing their focus? What are some things that you're saying to them going into the competition, as well as when they come out of the competition? Is it all about results? Or is it about, hey, what'd you learn today? Hey, how did you get better? hey, what is something that you need to work on moving forward? So even if you did have a bad experience, or even if you did fail, what are some things that we can do to move forward? That's the kind of narrative that we need to be able to make, because I'll be honest with you, coaches and parents, at the end of the day, if you're aggressive or passive aggressive around results, that's exactly where your athletes are going to be focused on. And I think we need to be far more aware of this as coaches, because I'm a coach too. We need to be far more aware of this as coaches and parents than what I think we are at this point. All right, if you're an athlete or a parent or a coach, what I want you to do is comment below about some ideas that you've come up with where you can start to install this mindset shift around competition for either your athletes, right? Or if you're an athlete, for yourself. Comment below and I'd be happy to give you some feedback and happy to start that dialogue with you to maybe give you some feedback and maybe some even more efficient suggestions as well. But I think it's incredibly important that you take the information that I've given you in this video and you spend some time trying to figure out, how can I apply this to either myself or how can I apply this to my athletes? All right, so there you have it. I think we accomplished everything that we set out to do. We talked about why do they fear competition or fear or avoid competition? What's the necessary mindset shift that they need to be able to make to create a better relationship with competition? And lastly, how do we go about installing this mindset in either ourselves, if we're athletes, or if we're parents or coaches? How can we install this mindset with your athletes? If you liked the video, I'd be humbled by a thumbs up. Again, make sure that you hit that subscribe button and notification bell. And of course, get over there, trainwithpert.com/free guide. It's really gonna help. I'll see you next time.